I will begin like this. In 1992, I was 26 years old. I had, I have diabetes, and I've got low vision. I was having a lot of trouble with my diabetes at that point, and a lot of insulin reactions, and my heart stopped. And there was nobody in the room. I laid down for a nap, and nobody was in the room with me. And my blood sugar continued to drop, and eventually, like I said, my heart stopped. I suddenly found myself standing at the bottom of a tunnel. The tunnel was about 3 feet in diameter, and it went a ways up. At the very top of it was a very bright light, a pure bright light that was so bright that when I looked at it from where I was standing, it blinded my eyes, and it put something in me right away that I realized wasn't human. So it was as if when I looked up into this light, I felt pure love, pure hope, pure, well, there was no sin. And I just felt pure. So, and I felt the love streaming down through this light. As I looked up, I realized I was beginning to float up toward this light into the tunnel. As I began to float up, I realized that I could stop. If I'd looked straight out, I could stop in the tunnel. When I looked up, I floated upward toward the light. So I had floated up a little ways, and I looked straight out, and it was as if I could see the universe, or I was in, I believe, the first heaven. I'd went into a place where there were stars, and I could see the entire lay of the earth. So I floated up, I looked up into the light, and I stopped again, a second time, and I looked down on the stars, and I seen the moon and the sun, and I seen the rotation of this. So I floated up again, I looked up, and the closer I got to the light, there was no way I could look straight out anymore. It just, like, that love just drew me in, that light just drew me in. And I was going at that point at a very high rate of speed. I realized that there is no way in eternity, there is no way to track time or speed. And so I went up through the light, and I realized that I was traveling at thought process. Okay, so when I would think, I would move to that position. I went through that light, and I felt as if I had changed to an immortal being, even while I'm still mortal here, and I sin and such. I think Yeshua or Yahweh or Yahuwah had to allow that to happen to me to show me this scene that he showed me. So when I went through that light, this happened where I was changed to a different being. I suddenly found myself standing on a green meadow that was so beautiful. The NDE could have stopped right there, and I'd have been perfectly fine coming back because it's just awesome. I looked around, and I seen flowers. I seen human words can't describe the beauty of this place. It's so awesome. Folks, you don't want to miss this. You don't want to miss this. So live, prepare. I think this is why I'm telling this. So don't miss this place. So I stood and I looked at this green meadow, and I saw there was grass so green. Flowers were perfect. There was not one petal on the flowers that had any form of death in it. There was no form of death or even a hint of death in the grass. You know, when you look at the grass here, it can be very green, but there's blades in there, or there might be some thistles or some different type of grass. This was it was all perfect. It was just so awesome. I looked and there were trees, and to answer the question that I saw, at least, I heard birds chirping, I seen butterflies, the colors of the butterflies and the colors of the flowers. I want to talk about that a little bit. These colors radiated out different colors. They spawned off new colors. And I realized that there was music to the colors. I was fascinated by that. Each time there would be a new color spawned, a new note would be played, and the notes and the colors were infinite. They just kept on going and going and going, and the music got more beautiful and more beautiful. The colors got, it's just fascinating. The dimensions that we see here, we say there's 640 million colors or 640,000 colors on a screen or in the computer world. There's no such a thing over there. The colors are absolutely phenomenal. They radiate out a frequency, so I felt the frequencies. It's all love, pure love. That's what this is. So amazing. So I stood there for I don't know how long, and I looked at this whole scene, and I realized that the flowers and the birds and the branches and leaves on the trees were all singing this beautiful song, and they leaned toward one way as if they were saying, look over there, look over there. And so I looked over there, and I saw a little box, just a little box, glimmering like such beauty. It was just a diamond or an emerald or something like that. And I saw that in the distance. And so I wanted to go check that out and see what that was. And so I went toward it. Now, here you don't walk in this place, you float. Or you just move very, very, very quickly. And as I appeared or I got closer to this box, the box got bigger and bigger, obviously. I could see it was exactly same dimensions, as high and wide, that the depth of it even, I could see through it. The depth of it was just, everything was perfect, all four square. And I came right up to touching distance of the wall. There was this really tall wall and all the way through, and I could have reached my hand out and touched the walls. I wanted to go inside the city, and as I had approached, and I could see that there were 3 gates on each side, and there were 3 gates on the back side. Now, I never seen Yahuwah. No man has seen Yahuwah, ever, except the sun. The walls had 12 different colors, and it's interesting to note, I talked about the colors earlier with the flowers, and I want to tell you something. I'm colorblind here. I can't see colors, and plus I have vision issues. The vision that I have here was completely wiped away there. And so I seen that there were 12 different colors in the wall. Oh, the other thing that I realized, and I figured this out later after I had returned to Earth, or I'd thought about this, is I didn't know this. Gems, emeralds, whatever they are, pearls, whatever those were, the purer they are, the more glassy they look and the more brighter they get, and you can look through them. It's almost like a glass, as if it was pure. You can see the color. I don't know how to really describe it. You can see the color and you can see through it, and yet you can see a very distinct color. So I stepped backwards a couple steps, and I was looking this way, and I'd come between 2 gates, exactly between 2 gates. So I seen that there were inscriptions above the wall, the gates. The gates were pretty wide. But I stepped backwards some way, floated backwards. and I felt a being coming up behind me, and I knew instantly because this being transmitted such love, such serenity, such peace. I wanted to fall down and worship him, or worship this being. It's not a him, just so you know that there's no male or female here. I wanted to worship this being so greatly, and I heard a voice say so kindly to me, "Don't worship me. I'm not the one to worship. Worship the one in the center of the city." And I couldn't see. That was blocked from my eyes. So he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said to me, "I'm going to show you some things." And so he had his hand on my right shoulder, and immediately the city disappeared, and there was this large panoramic screen, just like a TV screen, popped up in front of me. And I looked to the right, to the left, and on the right side, the story began. It moved from right to left, not from left to right, but from right to left. There was a ticker on the bottom, like you see on TVs, where they're sending these messages across continuously that rotate. You know, you can have your TV showing the show or whatever you're looking at. And on the bottom, there's a ticker. This thing had a ticker as well, and it was bright red. And as I looked at this thing, I noticed that there were stars, and there was the moon, and there was the sun in that. I didn't know what that was all about until later. I began to look at the story that was being told, and Yeshua, he spoke to me quite much throughout this whole thing. I remember everything he told me. I looked clear on the very end, and I saw a bunch of jets flying through the air. I saw cities. I saw the aircraft moving in and out. It was a kind of a cool sight. Everything was synchronized. The air traffic controllers, I can appreciate what they do now. I never really thought about this till after this NDE, but there's quite some synchronization that the traffic control or the air traffic controllers have to do. Anyway, I've seen these jets going back and forth, and I stood and watched that I was watching that for a little bit. And suddenly I seen 4 planes, 4 jets. They took off, and they were flying toward their destination. I guess I understood that. And suddenly they turned around. They banked really sharp, and they turned around, and 2 of them flew back toward a place, a city that I didn't know of at that point. And one flew toward another area, another city, and one flew a little ways, and it dropped. It flew, kept flying, but it dropped. And get this, it dropped a bomb. When the other 2 jets arrived at the first city, they flew toward, and there was an ejection of a warhead or a missile right underneath it. The jet did go into the building. But there was a bomb in front of that. And I'm not saying this because I've watched anything. This is what I saw. So that can be argued. I think obviously you know which event this was. But remember, this was 10 years before this happened that I saw this. Or 9 years. I'd seen the NDE, or I had the NDE in 1992, and this event, or so I saw that event, and this event happened in 2001. So I seen the whole thing go down exactly like it was recorded. with a few differences. I seen the missiles underneath, or the ejections with fire coming out of them from underneath. I seen this eject bombs, and they opened up holes bigger, and they went into the area. Now, the people died in these planes as it's recorded. There were lots and lots of deaths. That is absolutely the truth. The planes did go down. The one that I saw drop the bomb went down with the bomb. They got very low, and so that entire jet disintegrated when this bomb blew up. So it was very close to the ground. The bomb blew up and totally melted everything in there. Totally melted it. So there's very little debris. There was some, but there's very little debris to be found. So I seen that, and I realized then I was told Yeshua talked to me, and he said, this is the beginning. This is the beginning of a new era, he said. That event was done, and I looked a little much more ways in, and I was told that I would have to do some work, and I would have to begin preparing my heart for the coming work. I seen a lot of bloodshed. I seen people in areas being beheaded. I seen lots and lots of trauma in the area from the first event to the second event. I seen currency. I seen money. Seen a lot of these things that have happened already, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. There were a couple things as far as false prophecy that Yeshua told me. He said there will be a lot of false prophecy in this time. He told me that people would not believe me when I spoke. That has happened. He said to me that there would be a spike in religion, that more people would become very spiritual. That has happened. He told me that there would be a deterioration of the major churches, and that there would be spin-offs. We now have a host of different religions that cause much, much confusion to people out there. And so he told me these things as they were going down. I watched them all take place in the timeline that they have taken place. And while we thought there was a lot of there was a lot of deception and a lot of church issues way back, it got worse. After 9/11, it got very worse. The false prophecy was tremendous, and Yeshua talked to me a lot about that. The next event seemed a little bit more, I guess I'd use the word climaxed, a little bit more intense. And Yeshua said, before this one begins, you will need to get very serious about your life. And it's interesting. I'll talk about this more at the end. But it's interesting how my life changed in 2010. I didn't know any timelines here. And so the event on the board, there was a space between the first event and the second event. There was a space of so much space. And then between that and the third event, there was a space that I don't know. So the second event, I saw the waters of the earth. It seemed like I was lowered into a different area, that the board had lowered into a different area. At any point, I watched a huge wave appear, and I looked, and it was like I could see clear to the bottom of this water. I saw a huge crack in the bottom of the ocean, or this body of water. I seen a long line, and that line never closed up. I didn't know what in the world that was all about until I was told in a dream later on in my life. This line was very, very deep, and I watched as it opened up, and then it swished back. I mean, it came back together again, and it was like it slipped over some, and then it opened back up again and did the same thing. So it did two different things. It did two openings and then closing. So it's like two waves came up in this thing. There was this huge bank of water that rolled toward a island. And I didn't know where this was, didn't know anything about the island. And I seen this wave wash up on that island, and I saw a little plume of smoke begin to come about center place. And there was another wave came in, and I saw that smoke increase. It was just white smoke. And as I watched this whole thing, I seen thousands of people scrambling for higher ground. I seen people die, and I seen their spirits being lifted into the heavens, or the heaven coming toward me. So anyway, I watched this whole thing go down. I seen the plume of smoke begin from this place begin to spew out greenish waters or greenish stuff from the place, and the area turned green in the water, and it went out as a circle first, and it went pretty far out, and I seen fishies coming up, sea creatures coming up and dying. They laid sideways on the top of the water, and I seen all kinds of bad things happen. I seen this band get bigger, and more fish died, more sea creatures died. Now, I don't believe this is what Revelation talks about. This is something completely different. This has nothing to do with the waters giving up their dead, because the waters didn't give up their dead yet. So then it was after that, Yeshua, he was quiet during that period of time, and then he began to speak again. He says, I will show you many things after this happens. And I didn't know, I didn't know what this was. And so he said, I will show you many things, and I will be with you. I will walk with you if you follow my steps. Make sure you walk in my footprints. This is where the third event begins. I'm going to talk real quickly about the gap between there. There's a very interesting experience. He told me, he says, I was suddenly looking at, on this screen, I was looking at what I knew was the United States, and I saw the state of Texas, and I suddenly saw a man standing there. And remember, this is like a TV screen. I seen a man standing there, and he had a beard, and I was told, Yeshua told me, he says, you'll need to go see the man that went through the fire. I seen more bloodshed. I seen a lot of things begin to happen. I seen people killing each other, families getting angry at each other, and lots of things. I seen the cultic world. I seen the death of little infants. I seen the death of the abortions and things like that. It was just like the ground was just red with blood. There's a lot of blood that's been shed. The third event is the final event that will happen, and that's what I talked about 2 days ago. Right at the very beginning, Yeshua, he said to me, he tightened his hand on my shoulder very firmly, and he told me, he says, you will need to prepare your heart, and you will need to dedicate your life completely to me. You will need to be in other words, he said it in Hebrew, and I don't know Hebrew, but I understood it there. And he said, you will need to be completely dedicated to me. So the third event starts like this. I seen a flash of light suddenly appear, and when that flash of light began to come down, now I'm going to say this as if we were rolling in slow motion. The flash of light began to come down. I seen people from the graves all over this land, not the United States only, but all over this flat piece of land. I seen people rising out of their graves with white robes on them. I seen them coming up into the heaven, and I seen them assemble 144,000. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. It's a little bit of rabbit trail here. But these people were beheaded. They came out of their graves and they were beheaded prior to this. These are they who have washed their robes white in the blood of the Lamb. 144,000. They must die. They assembled in the heavens, and they were brought down to a place in Egypt. Now, there's 3 or 4 things that happen at once. I seen the flash of light. I immediately realized I was standing on a ridge where there were this 144,000. Now, this is the dimensional part of it, and if you're in the human state, you're not going to get this. This is what happened in Revelation. A lot of people don't understand that John saw interdimensional process. The only way to take that interdimensional process, and I am on a rabbit trail here, but I need to insert this. The interdimensional process has to be written in one dimension only, and it has to be laid out in separate dimensions or split out. They happen together. These 4 events were all starting at once. I talked about a northern army, about the giants in the north the other day. There was a large army that suddenly was there. I didn't realize where it had come from. And there were ranks. There were 9 ranks. These 9 ranks of giants started out at the very beginning of the line. They started out at between 30 to 35, 40 feet tall, and they got lesser and lesser as the ranks came down, and I seen the colors of these things change, these giants or whatever they were, and at the very last 2 rows, I seen men. Okay, I seen no women in this crowd, but I seen men. There was a long line of them. There was thousands and thousands of in this army. At the same time, I seen now I'm going to keep going back to that flash of light, because the flash of light is that was just like a split second before the rest of this stuff. I seen the northern army. I realized I was standing on a ridge with half of the 144,000 beside me. I seen a man, and I'm going to be very clear about this too. I seen a man standing beside me that I knew instantly was Yahusha. While he was standing behind me, he had his hand on my shoulder. He had tightened his hand very tightly on my shoulder, and he told me that at the point that this all started to pay close attention. I saw the men on the ridge, and they all had these black, I didn't know what a shofar was, and they all had these black shofars in their hands. Some of them didn't. Some of them didn't at this point, and they had them down. They were all synchronized or all in one way. They were pointing toward the outside of the line, toward the front, of course, and they were facing a city that had, again, and I now know that was the Jerusalem that we have today. There were gates in this place, and it was a mess. The city was, in very much turmoil. Anyway, these men were facing that wall. They had these shofars in their hands. I didn't know there were shofars. They had these pieces in their hands, and as they held them, they put them up to their mouth. They hadn't lifted them yet, but they put them up to the mouth when this flash of light came down. I heard helmets clank on the army to the north. I heard them clank down. Now, when the flashlight came, I looked over and I saw that they were up. Okay, they were prepared to go to war, but they did not yet go to war. When the men on the ridge put the trumpets, are the mouthpieces of the shofars, to their mouth, this army clanked their helmets down, and they strapped them up. And I heard this all loud boom because there were so many. I took close note of the way they looked, and they looked somewhat like jets. when they had their helmets down, they had these funny looking noses to them, and even while I could see their outer part, the legs and stuff, such, they moved at a very high speed when they moved. And they started moving. I seen a white horse with a rider on it, and they began to move away from the ridge. There was again at the first there was this group of 144,000 that was riding behind them, and there was then behind the 144,000 there was a huge amount of people, all dressed in white robes. The 144,000, everybody had white robes on their bodies. A rider on the white horse rode up and toward a line. I've now mapped this out. I've got a graphic of this. They began to ride. I don't even know if I think it's toward the east of Egypt. Rode toward the east and went right through what is now called Nineveh, and I knew it was Nineveh. So it rode past there. That's the ley line. And it rode up toward the waters. And then it marked off the territory. This horse rider did. At this point, the army was moving on the north, was beginning to move very, very fast, as if it was heading toward the city that the men on the ridge were looking at. I know this gets confusing, but remember, all these events happened at once. And I think that's what I didn't say the other day, that all of these events are stacked on top of each other. So this horse rider rode around, and I realized it was Yahusha. Got up to coming straight west again, had went east and then north, and now it's coming back west, marking off this territory. I don't even know, because I don't have the map in front of me, but I do know that this moved right up along the Ukraine border and up toward that. Now remember, the Northern Army is up in Russia, and they're moving very quickly toward the line that is being marked by Yahusha and the 144,000 first, and the huge amount of people that were just kept on coming from around the mountain. I mean, this thing laid out. It was huge. I seen the rider turn, and when it began to turn and head west and come up along the north line, the army had made it up to that line, and they stopped as if they could not go over it. As Yeshua and the men and women and children and all these people moved along that northern line going west, the army actually bowed to them. And I've chuckled many times to note that the evil forces succumb to the good at this point. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And folks, we need to stay on top of this. We can't let these things get us down, because this is going to happen. Maybe not in this way. I'm not saying it's going to happen in this way, but you know what? We are going to conquer. The men on the ridge, they lifted their trumpets, or their shofars, in the air and prepared to blow. The rider is riding straight south and is moving at a very high speed now, and turns and begins to ride east again and coming up along a body of water, and then completing that line where it had began at the Egyptian line. It turned and came back toward where I was standing with these men on this ridge, came back up and turned and stopped in front of a rock that had 2 holes in it, and, well, actually it had 3 holes, 2 holes here and one that looked like a face. I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know where this was or anything, but that's what I saw. And so I stopped there. The army on the north was completely stopped, still standing, waiting, as if it was going to come across, but it never did. The horse and the rider and the people had congregated around in this area, and they stopped in front of this rock, and there was a loud bang. There was a loud boom. The men on the ridge blew their trumpets. And then I noticed, I hadn't noticed this before, but I realized that all of the people that were following, except the 144,000 that were there, had shofars. The 144,000 had shofars right behind Yeshua on the ground. They were standing on the ridge beside me too. They had silver trumpets in their hands. Every person outside of the 144,000 had a silver trumpet. They did not yet blow those, but the sound of the trumpets blew, and the rock split right in half. That rock split right in half. And I saw a line, a red line going down. I didn't say this the other day, but I saw a red line going down, and Yeshua spoke to me. He says, "That's my blood. It lives." I then saw a gold box inside of this rock. Didn't have a clue what that was. Couldn't make out too much of the box, but I saw a gold box in there, very, very shiny. And on a ledge, right back, I seen stones, and I was able to see these. I seen transcription on the stones, and right beside it, I seen a black cassette tape. So I didn't make clear, but I seen a cassette tape, and when I saw that, Yeshua said to me, "You'll need to go in there before I ride and get that tape and take a sample of my blood." Okay, that's about to happen. So when the trumpets blew and the horse ride, this rock split open, there was something that happened so fascinating on the boundary that went from east to west, or from east to west on the northern line. The earth opened up, and it opened up huge, very big, and that whole army went down into this chasm. This earthquake covered it up. The land then closed up, and that army was gone. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. The horse rider then began to ride again. Yeshua said, "This is the final side, or this is the final part." And he said, "This is when when my glory will be shown to the entire world." He rode around, and he began to come in. He crossed over an area, and he rode through a gate. And I've seen that very clearly where that was, and I saw that was the eastern gate of Jerusalem. The men and women and children who have the silver trumpets in their hands raised those trumpets and blew. And the second shofar sound blew. And this time it was different. There was a war call, I learned later. At the very beginning and at the end, there was a jubilee call. The horse rider rode into the city, and all the people went into the city, and I was suddenly standing in front of that block that I'd seen at the very beginning. What a fascinating thing. Yeshua took his hand off my shoulder, and he asked me, he says, "Do you have any questions?" And it makes me a little upset, but I understand. I only ask one question. Can you believe that? I only ask one question. I said, "How will I know when it's time?" And he said to me, "I will show you. I will show you." He said, "I will tell you, not show you." He said, "I will tell you." And then he asked me, he says, well, he didn't ask me, he just told me, he said, I have to send you back. He said, what you've seen, you will not be able to remember until it's time. And so, 2012, I began to recall some of this stuff, and I've seen a lot of it replayed in my in visions and such. And I now am recalling the entire NDE. I was sent back, and the next thing I knew, I was laying in my bed, and my mother was standing over me with a glass of orange juice in her hand, and she had just treated me for the insulin reaction, and I came to. Now, I didn't talk about this for about 2 weeks. I was very angry at her for bringing me back because I wanted to stay there. And it was very traumatic for me. The next couple weeks was a pretty tough time because, you know, once you've seen something like that, you don't really want to be around here. I think I'm just going to share the event in 2010, right after the 2010 event. At least this is what the Spirit is bringing to me right now. I'm just going to share this. I had an office. We're in an apartment in a, you know, it's not a big apartment, but it's comfortable. And I had an office right below. Worked out really well. I was doing healthcare billing. I'm a computer programmer, and I'd written my own software to do online billing, claims billing, and such. And I was in the apartment upstairs. We're in an elevated part, and my office is right below. And I forgot my phone charger down there in the office. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck bristle up, and I was gonna. Asked my wife, asked Teresa, if she would go down there and get that. And she offered to go down and get it, and I said no, I'll go down and get it because I kind of felt that something was gonna happen, and that somebody was in the building that I really didn't want to see. And I'm saying that very seriously because I'm scared of the charge. Because I was given a charge. I got up, went to the apartment door, and went downstairs, and I was crazy. I acted like a child. We live in there's an alleyway to get to our door, and or walkway that's pretty narrow, and I looked down both sides of the walkway as if I, was a little bit afraid. And because I didn't want to see this person or this being that I thought might be in the building. I don't know how I knew, but I just somehow knew. Anyway, I went around the corner to the front of the building, and I stopped at the door, and I began to argue. I began to make excuse. I said, if you're in there, Yeshua, you need to lift the charge. You need to take it away because somebody else has to do this. Because, the skinning that tape and all that stuff, I'd made all kinds of excuses. I said, I'm legally blind. I can't see. I don't have no money. How am I going to travel? I made just tons of excuses. And I stopped at the door, and I made all these excuses, and I realized I was going to have to go in there if I wanted my phone charger. So finally, I unlocked the door, and I started making an argument again, and I said, if you're in there, Yeshua, there's only one way into this. In the small office that I had. Anyway, I said, if you're in here, and I opened the door and walked in, and I said, if you're in here, I said, please, you can lay hands on me and undo that charge that you gave me because I don't want to do it. And I heard shuffling. I had this server rack, and for those who know what a server rack is, it's about 6 feet or 7 feet tall, and that's where we put as IT professionals, we can put these servers in. Anyway, the servers were running, and I heard the shuffling behind that rack. And I just knew that this is going to be who it was. And sure enough, he came toward me, and folks, I want to share this with you. He is absolutely the most beautiful, I don't even want to call him a creature, being that I've ever seen in my life. He was dressed in a full scarlet, kind of a halfway scarlet purple robe. And he walked toward me, and he stopped about 3 feet away from me. And he just looked at me, and I was just absolutely making all kinds of excuses. And I said, I can't do this. I'm not smart enough. I don't know anything. I don't have a clue where to even go into this. I don't know how to get in there. And he just looked at me with such kind eyes, and he was very, very still. He reached his hand out toward me, and he made sure that the sleeve came up over his wrist. And he lifted his hand, he put his hand out, and I saw the nail prints. Saw the nail prints in his hands. I think he did that because he knew that I would make excuse. I'm like this Thomas guy. Anyway, I saw and I looked down at his feet. And I saw the prints there too. I seen the nail prints. And so I knew it was him. It wasn't an angel, it wasn't the devil, it was Yeshua. He said 3 words. He said, "It is time." After he left, I was very confused by that. He then turned around and he walked back behind the servers and he disappeared. I didn't really know what to do with that. And so I began to pray and I began to search, and I just didn't know really what to do with that. And from that point forward, I got really serious about things. Like I said, I have major health issues, and I thought, well, maybe, I was going to die or something like that before this time would come. One of the things I did miss in the NDE, I did see right before or right in the middle of that third event, I seen Damascus go up in smoke. And this was part of the thing that Yeshua had told me. He had said to me, that's when your work will begin, when Damascus goes up in smoke. So I'm waiting on that to happen before I can even move. Whenever that happens, then this thing will begin, as far as I know. So that is probably all I'm going to share at this point. You guys all, friends, brothers, sisters, loved ones, it's evening here in Minnesota. Have a good evening, have a good day, and do what's right. Serve the King. Shalom.